This is session 5. This time, our teacher is Nestor Bonilla. He's one of our members from the Starknet community. Him and I were working together in some things about Basecamp, like editing videos. Some of the animation that you see sometimes on Basecamp is done by Nestor as well. And today, he actually prepared a front-end session that it was really needed for Basecamp. Now, session 5 is actually how to connect that backend written in the Starknet in Cairo with a frontend that your users can actually use and interact. You can read, you can write to the blockchain. So yeah, Nestor, if you want to do some introduction about yourself and just take it from there.
Cool. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. In this class, we're going to be talking about frontend. What are we going to be talking about specifically? We're going to be talking about requirements. And what do I mean by requirements? It's what components do we need to interact with those smart contracts that we are deploying from frontend. We're going to see a couple of libraries that we can use to ship this, and we're going to jump straight to live coding. So who am I? David mentioned, I'm Nestor Bonilla. You can find me on X or Farcaster or Twitter, whatever the name is, at 0xNestor. And this is the QR code for the workshop code for today. Let's talk about Starknet and the compilation process. In previous classes, you have seen how to create a Cairo smart contract, and then you have deployed that, and then you launch it, you create the class, and then you create an instance of that contract. Just remember, we will need, when we will start to interact with that contract that we already deployed, we will need the address of that contract and also the ABI, which contains the functions that we can call. Okay, now about libraries. We have a set of libraries that we can use to create our frontend. From more complex to more easy to use, technically we could use Starknet Rust to create a frontend, but that's gonna be a thing, right? Because we will need to write our WebAssembly application and then a frontend portion of it, but technically you can do it. Then you have Starknet Py if you want to use Python for your frontend. But also you can have Starknet.js, and this is the one that we are going to be using together with Starknet-React. So in the world of JS, pretty much our comparison to Ether.js will be Starknet.js. So on top of Starknet.js, there are some folks that have created different projects. For example, Starknet-React and Starknet Kit. And what do I mean by that? It's like, of course, you can create your frontend from scratch just using Starknet.js. That's 100% doable. But if you are creating, for example, a React application, you will end at some point building your own hooks. For what? For example, you want to know the balance of your account or of the account that is connected to the application, and then you want to get those updates every 1 block, 2 blocks. So after that, you will say, okay, let's create a hook for that, and then you will create those hooks over and over. These guys from Starknet-React created a set of hooks in order to allow you to speed your development process. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be using Starknet-React that under the hood use Starknet.js. Now, if you click here, we will go to the repo. So in this repo, we will have different branches from 0 to 4, where 0 is just a setup. We're going to be working on 4 steps today. First, we're going to read the data. We're going to read balance. Then we're going to interact with a contract by reading it. And then finally, we're going to write. So those are going to be the branches for today. It's very self-explanatory. Here are all the steps. And let's start. So I have prepared the workshop frontend project in my local. So this is pretty much the one that you are seeing, you're seeing here. So let's start first by going to Starknet-React, which is the library that we're going to be using today, Starknet-React. In order to start, we have two avenues. The first one, it's about create one project from the get-go, and the other one is you have already one application and then you want to install Starknet-React hooks. In this one, we're gonna be using the CLI in order to create an application from start. Okay, so in this project, we see that we have a Starknet Foundry project. We just have our smart contract, and then we will have one basic web app. In this case, let's create another one. So for that, let's run npm init starknet. And the first thing that we will see is what is your project name? Let's do a demo. Next step is, do you want to use Next.js or do you want to use Vite? In this case, we're going to be using Next.js. Once that happens, you're going to see a demo folder here. We will have the project demo here. Let's run it. Let's go to demo, then do the yarn in order to install the dependencies. One thing that I did in this repo was to update the dependencies. Right now, if we go to the package.json, there are some library newer versions of it. So I just installed it the latest, as you see, with the at latest.
So a couple of questions. Nika was asking, how much more difficult would it be to use Bun? B-U-N.
It will be straightforward. You shouldn't have any issues, to be honest.
Other question from Thurston is, there are Starknet libraries for JS and Python. What about Java? Is there something for Starknet like Web3j in Java, I imagine?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about Java. I haven't created nowadays one application using Java. So I'm not sure on that one.
There is an SDK for JVM library. So I'm gonna put it here in the chat.
Cool.
I don't know how well maintained it is, but it exists, the repo.
Okay. So we just updated some dependencies that we have here in the package.json. One thing that I want to do here is to install Tailwind forms because I'm going to be using that in the last step.
Question from Pratik. Yarn command not found. Do I need to install Yarn?
Oh yeah, you need to install it. By default, for example, if you work with JavaScript, probably you will have npm. So you can do npm install and then all these libraries, and that will work. Instead of, for example, yarn at, just do npm install and then blah blah blah. That will work. We updated the dependencies. We added form from Tailwind, and then we need to integrate that plugin into the application. How we do this? We can go to tailwind.config, and then we will go to plugins. In the plugins, we are gonna say, okay, I want to require Tailwind form. That's the only thing we need to do. Let's see how does that looks. Yarn dev. If you are with npm, you can do npm run dev. Basically, what this is doing is going to the package.json, and you have here some script. This is calling. This is scripts. So you can do yarn dev, or you can do npm run dev. Or if you want to go to the bare metal kind of, you can do npm run next dev, something like that. This is pretty much the application that you will see when you install Starknet-React. It's just a component that uses the connection with the wallet, and then you have some buttons in order to learn more about Starknet. Let's make some improvement probably, and I'm gonna be explaining how this app is configured. So first, in a Next.js application, in the latest versions, we have the layout. So in the layout will be the most basic component where we are going to have a root layout, and here we'll have the HTML tags, and then we will see our first component, which is a Starknet provider. So Starknet provider is pretty much when you are going to create front-end applications that interacts with a blockchain, you will need a provider to wrap your application. And then that's the provider that is going to be used in all your components. In this case, we are using Starknet provider, and that comes from the component defined here, components Starknet provider. If we go to our files, we will see we have a components and we have Starknet provider. Here, this is what it contains. It's a Starknet configuration. And here we will set whatever we want. We want, for example, to interact with the chains. We're going to say, I want to interact with mainnet, or no, I want to interact with testnet. In the providers, we're going to say, okay, we want to work with the public provider, which right now are about Nethermind. What about the connectors? We will see the wallet connectors that we have available. And Explorer, you can set the Explorer that you desire. Let me close this in the meantime. Okay, so let's see one by one. So chains. Right now, we're going to be working with Sepolia, right? We don't want to be working on mainnet right now, Sepolia. So we are going to be importing that from Starknet-React chains, and we're going to replace that on this array, chains. Providers. Right now, by default, we are using public provider. I have tried to use other providers. In this case, you could do Alchemy provider or Lava provider or any other provider. And then for these ones, just to provide the API key, for example, and then use that. But until this time, I have had issues making that work with Sepolia, not with mainnet. So because of that, we're going to be using public provider. But just for you to know, if you want something like Lava provider, you just need to do something like this, and then you can say, okay, Lava provider is going to be a Lava provider, and then you're going to set here the API key pretty much, right? And then you're going to set that into the provider. Okay, so the connector, we can see that here, and this is about the wallets that are available in the ecosystem for you to interact with. Of course, we have here the two main wallets, Argent and Bravos. But if you, for example, are building your own wallet, you can say something like my custom wallet. But of course, you will need to define that here in the Starknet provider. Right? In this case, we are not working with a custom wallet, and we're going to be working with Argent and Bravos. Then we have an order, and you can set order to random or alphabetical. I select random, it's going to pick one randomly. So with the Explorer, we have a couple of them. By default, they are using Voyager, but you can also say, I want to use a star scan. You say,
Nico is finding an issue saying cannot find module at Starknet-React chains for its corresponding type declaration.
You mean for Sepolia? This is part of Starknet-React library. Are you using it?
Maybe they need to run yarn install?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because once you create the project with the npm, with this one, with this one, npm init, that doesn't comes with the dependencies installed. You need to run yarn install or npm run install in order to install the dependencies, and then you will have access to it. Okay, so I was mentioning that, for example, if you don't want to use Voyager and you want to use
But the question is, what is Voyager? Why do we use it?
Okay, good question. Let me go to our browser. Let me show you the both. Voyager is one explorer, right? Starknet Explorer, we can check on mainnet or Sepolia, but that's not the only explorer. We also have Star Scan. So both are explored. In both, we can see our transaction, blocks, contracts, and so on and so forth, right? It's about preference at this point. So you will say, yeah, I like Voyager or I like StarScan, and that's the one that you are going to configure in your Starknet config for other hooks that we're going to be looking. For example, when we submit a transaction, and then we will have a link to send the user to that link for one specific transaction we submit. So that's going to be using one explorer. And this is how you configure that Explorer. Okay, that's pretty much about Starknet config. Now let's go back to layout. And we already explained Starknet provider, right? That's the one that is going to wrap our application. And then from that point, we are able to create our pages. Let's go. And we are going to be working just with one page in this project. And for that, let me just make it more simple. This layout. Let me just replace this with this code, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, we just clean a little bit the first page that we see. Let me just refresh this. And we have just a simple page where we have a title and we have a wallet bar component. This is the component that was by default in the application. And we're going to be working with it. Okay, so let's see first wallet bar. So wallet bar is the first time that we're going to be using the hooks from Starknet-React. Now let's go back to Starknet-React, and this is the page that we're going to be looking today. We're going to be looking on the different hooks, and let's start with the first one, which is about accounts. So in accounts, we see here that there are three main hooks: use account, use connect, and use disconnect. And those are the ones used on this wallet bar function component. So in this one, we're going to be using first use account in order to get the address of the user that is connected. We also have, we're going to be using use disconnect in order to get a function to allow a user to disconnect. So let's go back to what comes in wallet bar. In wallet bar, we are getting an address from the hook, and we are just saying, hey, if you have an address, return the function wallet connected. If you don't have it, return connect wallet. And what does wallet connected comes from? It comes from here. And then we are saying, okay, get the address, get the disconnect function, and show this. Connected, and we're gonna get a shortened address. And this is no more than a slice address, because most of the time we don't want to show all the address. We just want to show the first character and the last ones. And then we are having a button. This button is putting the disconnect that we got from the use disconnect in order to allow the user to disconnect from the wallet. So that's pretty much the first and default component that comes in wallet bar. And we are just importing that into our page, wallet bar.
That's a question from Ankit. If we don't have Bravos, we have only Argent X. So in the homepage, it will display only Argent X?
Yeah, good question. It will say that it's not available. That's it. So nothing to configure here. But of course, if you're building one application that just works with one wallet, yeah, you can remove the other one. But if there's no specific need for you to use just one wallet, you can have both. And if the user doesn't have that installed, it won't show it. So that's about first step. That's about branch 0. Now let's use more hooks. Now let's see what if you want to have a minting process. Let's say that could be one ERC20, or that could be one NFT. And then you will say, okay, for today, I want to allow the minting process from 9:30 a.m. till 11 a.m. my time. Then you have two avenues here. You have the first avenue, which is let's create one function on that smart contract to say something like, is minting available? And the user is going to be poking every time, like, oh, is minting available? No. Is minting available? No. Is minting available? Yes. Okay. Or show some HTML in the front end. But there's another way. And what if for that specifically, you don't need to use the smart contract? So what if we use just an information from the block, getting the block number, and say, hey, we know that this minting process will start at this block and will end at this block. So with that, you're good to go, and just read information from the blockchain.
From Kenneth. Could you explain a little bit more about the wallet connect function?
Sure. Okay, so Going back, layout, we already explained about Starknet provider. This is gonna wrap our whole application. Then that will allow us to use the hooks in all the components of the applications. Then the first hook that we're using, it's wallet bar. Wallet bar is included in the page. Page will be the default page that we're gonna be that Next.js is gonna be reading. The default page. This is using wallet bar, and then that function component is using the hooks. Which hooks? The first three for account. Use account, use connect, and use disconnect. Use connect is just to connect the a wallet to our front end. Use disconnect is used to disconnect a wallet from the application that we're building, and use account is used to get the address of the user connected. Which part was the one that was not clear enough?
I was saying use connect, Kenneth. So that hook in particular.
So if we look for use connect, we are getting the connectors and the connect function. So what we're doing here is once we have the connectors, where does the connectors comes from? They come from Starknet provider, where we define them here and we say, okay, these are the connectors that we're going to be using, Argent and Bravos. We define that, we set that into the Starknet config, and then we are using that into wallet bar. And we say, okay, now let's get the connectors and let's do a map on them. For every connector, let's put a button, and then if a person click on that button, we're going to call the connect function, and that function expect a connector, and we are going to be passing that connector. And also we are setting a connector ID, which is what you see here as Bravos or Argent. So that's pretty much what we're doing here. So we were talking about getting information from with the block number. For that, let's look again to Starknet-React, and let's look for a hook that will help us on that. Right now, we are just querying, so we should look just on the query portion. So we have useBalance, we have useBlock. Well, let's see useBlock. So useBlock, let's see the return. They mentioned that we will get the block, but we don't want the block. We just want the block number, right? So is there any other hook that will make the work? What about useBlockNumber? That seems very self-explanatory for what we want, which is just to get the block number. And we see, okay, this is how we use it. This is the hook that we need to import. Okay, let's try this one. What are we going to be doing? First, I'm going to put here just code snippets, which are not connected to any hooks. Let's go to page and let's put this code below the wallet bar component. And if we see here, this is not using any hook. This is just using Tailwind classes. And this is what I want to show. Let's see. Do we see here? It's a box that contains the first step. Read the blockchain, current block number, and I want to know if we are live, for example. So let's use the hook. So we will need to use useBlock hook and block number from Starknet. Okay, let's just import use block number from Starknet-React core, and we're gonna be using block number from Starknet. This is how we are gonna be using use block number hook. Let's put that here in the page, and we see an error. Who can say that which is the error here? If you see, there's an error here in the documentation. We are trying to use block number, but we are importing use block, and we don't want that. We don't want to get all the blocks. So let's replace this with use block number. Okay, now we are importing this. We are importing block number. Cool. And now we have the hook. One thing that you need to have in mind is if you are going to be using in your component many hooks, probably you're going to have an issue with the naming, because let's say that we're going to be using 3 hooks and then all of them return a variable called data. So at some point React, it's gonna break and say, hey, I don't know what data do you mean. Do you mean data from useBlockNumber, or do you mean data from use account? I don't know. So because of that, we can do a rename, something like block data. And this is how you rename this variable. Something like block is loading, is error, block is error, and we already renamed this. Now, how can you use this? Let's go to our code that we put, and we have current block number. Okay, how can we replace this? Let's see what we have. Usually when you have the hooks, you have what comes with the result of the hook is going to be the data part. The other ones are going to be used for front end stuff, like, I want to paint something, I want to show this HTML if this component is still loading, or if I have an error, I want to show this HTML, and so on and so forth. But usually data is the one that we will be using. So let's use block data. We are getting the data from the hook. Let's see on the page, and we have the number here. We are in this block number. We want to verify. Let's go to Voyager, Starknet, and we can go to blocks. Let me go. I don't know why this is in Spanish. Let's go with the other one. We can go to blocks, and then in blocks, we will see which are the blocks that are being minted, right? So this one has been minted 9 minutes ago. So right now we are in this number of blocks. So let's just verify if that makes sense. And yes, we are. Now, what if we want to know if we are live in this workshop? Let's do that. And for that, we will need to define a variable that is about something like block number. And then let's do workshop ends. And then let's define one number, which is going to be that number. Let's see. If we are now in this block number and say, this workshop, it's about 2 hours. So let's take our calculator. And let's say, okay, we are like 2 by 60, which are the minutes per hour. And then we say, okay, every block is minted in around 6 minutes, right? We can see that here. So we divide it by 6. And then we just need to sum around 20 blocks to this number. So we can click here and we can say this, and we are going to add around 20 blocks here. And now we know when the workshop ends. You can do that for your minting, for example. And then the only thing that we'll need to do is to say, okay, if there is a block data that is below the workshop ends, then we are going to be placing one string called we're live.
Nestor, one question. Are you looking at the block number in Sepolia or in mainnet? Because those numbers look different, so what I see.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, Ryan mentioned that in the chat.
I was probably going to have an error then.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Good catch. Thanks. So yeah, good point. Let's replace this, and then let's add 20. It should be 78, right? So we're going to say, okay, if the block data number that we're getting is below the workshop ends, so we're going to put we're live on workshop. If not, workshop has ended. That's it. That's it. And yes, we're live on workshop. But what if I want to modify the UX for this? And I want to paint something like a green background on the box? What if we can do a ternary here and say, if the block number or block data, it's below the workshop ends, we're going to be placing a background green, if not a red one. Thank you, Copilot, because I was doing this before. Let's try. Now we see that we are live in the block in the workshop, and we have modified the UX. So just to check that out, let's just modify this and this. Oops, no, not that symbol. This one. And that should be red, right? Cool. Then let's go with the second step. We already got information from the block number information. What if we want to read the data or the balance of an account. We are connecting right now our account, but we don't know nothing about that account. Let's get the balance out of it. So let's go again and just paste this snippet code, which is just React code. And this is what I want to show. Another box showing a title of read your balance. Now I want to show a symbol and I want to show a balance. Okay, how can we show this? Let's go back to the hooks and let's see which is the one that we can use for this. Let's go to query. And what about useBalance? What does that allow? With useBalance, we have these options. We can set a token address. We can set the address and we can set a watch. And here we are going to be getting a decimal, a symbol, a formatted, and value. It seems like this is what we want to use. Okay, let's go and import. We already are importing things from some. Let's import just these two hooks. Let's go to the top. Let's add these additional hooks, use account and use balance. And how are we going to use it? They show us here. First, we will need to get the address from use account, and then we're gonna set that address into the other hook, use balance to get the balance of that address. Let's try that out. We have the address and we have it's loading. Let's rename it and say balance is loading, is error to balance is error, error to balance error, and data to balance data. Cool. We are getting the address here, and then we're setting the address into the hook. But we are going to be using also addresses for address and address for the smart contract. So I don't want to confuse people. So I want to be crystal clear. What can we do? Rename it. Let's say I want to name it user address. And now you will see, hey, but now there's no such variable because we are renaming it. So this is showing an error. And then if we change it, the hook will also say, hey, I don't know why are you sending me, because what I am expecting is address. And I'm like, okay, cool. But the address that you're expecting is user address. And this is how you solve this. So this is how pretty much the hook will work. Now we need to use that into the UX. We can go here to the box that we defined, and let's say, what was the name? Was balance data. As I mentioned before, it usually goes in the data. Okay, balance data dot, and we have a couple of things that we can choose. We have decimals, formatted, symbol, and value. Probably it's symbol. Let's see. And we're not getting nothing. We're getting nothing. Why do you think that's happening, John? Right now, we're trying to get the balance data from the account, and we are putting a symbol. By default, this hook mentioned that if not token ERC20 contract address is provided, it should default to native token, in this case, Ethereum, right? But why we're not getting something here?
Manas is saying because the wallet isn't connected.
Yeah, that's it. Then if
Claudio
we
said the
connect
same
the
thing.
wallet, we have the symbol. Now, the other one, it's balance. Let's see, balance data dot. Now we have two values that we can use here. We can use formatted or value. Value is the one that is going to return a number if we want to process that as a number, or we can use formatted, which is going to return a string. We're going to be using that one. And maybe if you comes from the EVM world, you know that back in the days, you will get a number and that number was formatted with the 18 decimals, for example, for Ethereum, and then you will need to use a utils and convert that number to show it like this. Right now, with Starknet-React, you can use the hook and it's going to be friendly for your balance to be shown. Okay, that's it about it. And the last thing that I want to do in this box is like, first, let's um, show a shorter number. So for that, we can say, hey, from this number, let's convert that into a number and then use to fix. Let's say that we want to show just 4 decimals. We can put 4 and that will do the magic. Now, let's say that we want just to show this box only if an account is connected, because it doesn't make sense to show this. If there's a disconnected account, we don't want to show not a number error here. So because of that, we can wrap all this into a conditional, and we can say, okay, if there is no balance loading and there is no balance is error, then we're gonna show this. Cool. Now, when we see our UX, when there's no wallet connected, the box is not going to be shown. But once we connect that, we're going to be showing the box with the symbol and the balance. And as I mentioned before, in this hook, if we want to show a balance of a specific token, we just need to say token, and then we're going to pass that specific address of that ERC20. Okay, that's step number 2. Any question right now? I already like the Starknet-React library. Cool. Okay, let's go to step number 3. In this step, let's see. Okay, we already read a block number. We already read a balance of an account connected to our front end. What about now going to read data from our smart contracts, right? So let's do that. And again, let's show what we want to do in a box. That box, again, just HTML with Tailwind classes. I want just to present a box where we're going to be reading the balance of our contract. And I want to put a button to refresh that data. For example, if we lose connection. So this is the UX portion. Let's go here, Starknet-React, and let's go to the hooks. Now we are going to be reading data from a smart contract. What can we use? If we see here in query, we already use balance, use block number. Now there is one called useContractRead. Let's see that. So we see that with useContractRead, we can do perform a read-only contract call, right? And we just want that. We just want to read data. We don't want to update the status yet. Okay, let's do it. And this probably reminds you on the first thing that I mentioned on the call. What do we need in order to interact with smart contract? We need 2 things: a smart contract address, where to point, but also we need the ABI, which is the functions that are in how we are communicating with that contract. So let's import first the hooks. We are already using use account. If we go to our top use account, we already are using this one, but we need to use useContractRead. Cool. With the importance, we are okay. Let's go step 3. And now let's say I want a contract address to be one specific address. So for this example, we are going to be using the contract that I already deployed. You can deploy this contract that is in the Foundry project. In order to do that, you will see the contract here is just a simple hello world that has 2 functions, one to increase balance and the other one to get the balance. And then in order to publish that, it's already on the README file. You need a Starknet Foundry file where you have a link to your account in your local computer, and then you will use SNCast in order to either declare it if you're gonna change something about the smart contract, or or deploy the instance of that contract. So once that happens, you will have one folder called target. in that folder called target, you will have another one called dev. In that one, you will have a couple of files. You will have a compile contract class and a contract class. What we're going to be using is contract class. Here you will see, as I mentioned before in the graphic, you will see the Sierra program, which is the one that is going to be compiled by the sequencer in order to generate the Cairo assembly, the custom file, and to return the proof. But also, aside the Sierra, you will have a portion which is about the ABI. And basically, if you just copy and paste this portion, you are good to go. But also, you can do it in another way. Let's first get the contract address. The contract address that we're going to be using, that it's already deployed. Well, we are in demo. Let's go to our page. We set the contract address, and we're going to be using, this is the one that we're going to be using. Let me put that into the chat. This is a smart contract address that we're going to be using. So if you deploy it from your local, that's how you look it. If you just want to copy paste the ABI, you can go to let's say Voyager. Oh no, that one. This. Let's go to this one. And then we can look on Sepolia, and then we can look the smart contract. This is the contract, and then we will be able to go to code, and then in the code portion, this is the ABI. So two ways to get this. So we can copy this, and let's create one, and we can create one folder and one file. Let's say ABIs, ABI.json, and then we're gonna paste that here. So this is the ABI that we're gonna be using, and here we will see that we have get balance, and we also have increase balance here. We have the two functions here. Okay, let's go back to our page. We already have the contract. Now let's go and say, let's use, well, let's import. Let's import the contract ABI from, we're gonna be using that. We have that. Let's go out. Let's go to ABIs, and then let's go to ABI.json. Okay, with this, we are importing the contract API, the two things that we need, and now let's use the hook, actually. So to use the hook, let's go back here and say, after this, we are gonna get the address. Okay, we already are there. Now let's copy this. This is how we should use useContractRead. The options are the function name, the arguments, a block identifier, parse argument, parse result, ABI address, and watch. Let's try. Okay, first, let's rename, right? In this case, this contract read. So let's rename it something like read data is error, read is error, is loading, read is loading, and error, read, error. Cool. We are using use hooks, use contract read, and we are going to be passing first the function name, which is the name. Let's go to our ABI, and then let's go for get balance. This is the name of the function. Second step, let's pass the arguments. Do we have any arguments? Let's find that out. Inputs. No, there are no inputs, so there are no parameters. So we don't need any parameters. Remove this. Then ABI, which is the ABI? Okay, contract ABI. And then we need to say ABI, contract ABI, and then address, where is this contract located? It was called contract address. And what's true? What's true means that if this is true, it should refresh data every block. It should. But we also going to be using this button in order to press it and try to refresh the data. Okay, with that's it. That's all that we need to configure the hooks to read data from a contract for one specific function. Now, let's go to our snippet here, read your contract. So let's modify this balance. So let's say it was read data, but we need to say read data to string. We're gonna be passing this number to a string representation, right? Because right now it's a number, it's a U250. If we go to our contract, when we get the balance, this is a U256. So we are converting this into a string representation. So let's see how that looks. Let's see. Oh, wow. It's a huge balance. Before was very low. Okay, this is the read data. This is the balance. And now another thing that we can do is to replace this console log every time we're going to press. Because, for example, if we inspect that just to show this is working in the console log, every time we're going to press, we're going to click refresh, 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 right? But we want to use this other thing from this hook that is called, let me see, it's called data refetch. This is not in the documentation, but if you explore, for example, the hooks on what do they come inside it, you can find other things that you can use.
Claudio is saying read data should be balanced data, balanced data.
Oh, okay. Let me just finish this. So we have this refetch. I was exploring the other day with this. So they mentioned that, you know, this should update, this should redo the fetch of the data. And let's rename it read refetch. And we can use this just to replace console log and say refetch. Okay. So read data. Yeah, we're placing this here. And this is the balance. Let's go to read the contract and let's go to connect. Well, to read, you don't need to. So in order to try, if this is okay, we can go to Voyager or start scan and look for the smart contract, right? With this address, and then we can go to read contract and we are gonna see all the functions that are available. And then we can click on decimal in order to have decimal representation, and we can click on query. That's gonna return the number. So yeah, that seems okay. And we are connecting the refresh button. So let's say that we want just to update that. We can go to write contract and then click on Bravos. To update the status, we do need to connect a wallet because there is no way, you know, to update the status without signing a transaction. So we can connect the wallet and then we can click and we can increase the value and we can transact. So this is an example on how you can do this from an Explorer. Let's see, sign, and then if we read the contract, we should see a higher number. Cool. Now we already read a contract. We already read a balance. Let's go to the last step, which is what if now we want to update the status of a contract, right? We want to change the balance. We want to increase it. So let me put again a code snippet. Okay, should be here. Okay, so first let's see. We're gonna be creating one form. This form will have just one input. For that input, let's use a use state in order to have amount and set amount. For that, we will need first to import use state. This is just, so for that, let's import use state from React. Then we will need to define a variable with useState. Let's go and write step number 4. And in this one, let's say let or count. We're going to be using const amount and then set amount, use state. And if we want to define one number for that variable to have as default, we can place it here. If not, it's going to be empty. Let's use state 0. And then we need, let's put now the snippet code. This is going to be a form. This is why I install form plugin before at the beginning. So we will have one function. This is again just React handle submit. Let's define this. We can create a function here. We can create a function called this is a function that is going to be async, and it's going to prevent the default behavior of a form, which is reload the page. And we're going to be logging form submitted with that specific amount, and that amount is the amount that is in the form. And here we will implement the Starknet logic. So right now, all this portion is just React, right? Not HTML, not hooks. Let me click these. I think that is better here. Okay, we have a form that inside it has just a write to contract h3. Then we will have a label and an input. That input is going to be the amount variable that we are be updating every time this a content on it change. So we're gonna say event.target.as value as number, because this is just gonna be a number. And then we will have an anchor. So this one, let's say, is just a link, plain link, and we are gonna be modifying that later. And then finally, we will have a button that it will be type submit, and that's gonna call what it's gonna be calling handle submit. So just to show it works, let's inspect. Let's go to console and then let's click here. It's working. Okay, now let's go and modify that with the hooks. So let's go back to the page of Starknet-React, and let's go now and look how can we modify the status, update the status. So we see that right now we are not going to query the blockchain. We're going to mutate the status of it. So because of that, we can go to the bottom and say mutation. So there are 2 hooks, use sign type data and use ContractWrite. We're going to be using the first one, use ContractWrite. And here we will see, okay, there is a hook for that, use ContractWrite. Again, we will need to have an ABI, and we will need to use useMemo. UseMemo, again, is just part of React. It doesn't have to do with Starknet or Starknet-React. Let's use useMemo, and let's import the hook. Let's go here. Let's import this additional hook, use ContractWrite, and then we will see, okay, how this work. This is getting an address, because in order to sign a transaction, we need to have an account connected, a chain, and then they define a contract variable. That contract we need to pass to use contract, we need to pass an ABI and an address. But we see there's no use contract here in the hook, so we will need to add it probably. So let's use contract. We added that. And then let's add this portion. Let's go to step number 4. Let's go and define the contract. Okay, the ABI, we already know, right? We already know that the ABI, it's going to be called contract ABI. And the address, instead of this one, we're going to be saying contract address. That's it. With that, we have a variable for the contract. Now, with that, we're not doing nothing, right? We just having a variable for the contract. Now what we need to do, now we need to create or populate our transaction. Let's see that. We are gonna define a variable calls. It's gonna be using use memo, and then we're gonna be saying, let's see, and then we're gonna be saying if user address, in this case, this is pretty much what this portion of code is saying. If there is an address connected and there is a contract, then return zero, return empty, which means, I don't want to do any transaction. But if that's not the case, let's populate the transactions in an array, and we are gonna be updating that every time contract and address change. So in this case, we're gonna be using user address, and then contract, that would be it. So if there's no address and there's no contract, then we're not gonna do anything. And the update, it's gonna be contract and also user address. But there is a catch here. Let's remove this. There is a catch here. So imagine that this is gonna be calling to create to populate transaction. But if we leave it like that, that's gonna happen only when it loads, right? So what will happen if you change the content of that input? It won't happen. It won't do anything, right? Because the first time that you're gonna call this, it's gonna work, because aside from that, we are not updating the contract nor the user address. So we need to add another dependency. And the another dependency will be the amount variable. So that means that every time we're gonna change the value of that amount, we're gonna be repopulating this transaction. And then what we're gonna be doing is returning, and we follow this, contract.populate transactions. Here we're gonna put the transaction that we want to interact with. And for that, let's go to our ABI and let's go to increase balance. That's the function that we want to call. And then if we go back to our ABI, this does have some inputs in, and it has one input called amount, and this is an U256. So let's go back here. This example was with two parameters, address and U250. In this case, we are gonna be, there's a good article for Starknet.js. I'm gonna be adding that later for you to understand how the low and high works. But right now, we're just gonna be using the low value, and then we're gonna be saying, okay, for the low portion, if we have an amount, then use amount. If there's not such amount, then send 0, right? And what do I mean by that? Say, for example, let's say that we go here and we just delete all the content of that input and we leave it empty. If we don't have this validation, pretty much it's gonna break, because it's gonna say, we cannot pass a non-a-number value. So we need to be sure that we are passing some value, even though there's nothing here. Okay, this is how we are populating the calls. And then finally, what we need to do, let's go back to our page, is to define how are we gonna call that transaction. And for that, we're gonna be using this.
There's a question from Wellington. How do we send sync write to contract? For instance, I want to call approve an amount and right after call transfer from.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So basically, this is where you are gonna be working on. Here, you can create multiple calls with populate transactions. This is how you will do it. In this example, we're not gonna be using this because it's just one transaction. But let's say that you have an ERC20, or let's say that you are going to have a minting process. So in that minting process, let's say first you will, in the traditional way, you will need to first to do an approval, and then once that approval passed, then you will click, you will call the mint, and then the mint is going to do a safe transfer, and so on and so forth. In this context of Starknet, you can do multiple calls in one. So you will use, specifically in this portion, you will need to modify that here. Good question. And then in order to call it, to call the calls, we are going to be using useContractWrite. And what we're going to be having is write async the data and it's pending. So let's go now and connect the dots.
Wait, just one more comment. You define the U256 as a struct with low and high, but the Starknet.js also has a library called uint256 that you just pass a number and takes care of creating the struct for you.
Yeah, probably you can do that. That's the way that I try for this one. Yeah, probably you can do that as you mentioned. So let's see what else. Now let's try to try that out. Let's see. So in this form, we are calling handle submit. So the only thing that we need to modify now is handle submit. We are preventing the default. We are doing a console log. Now we just want to call what we want to call write async. That's the only thing that we need to do. Write async. Let's try. Let's say that we're gonna change the status. We're gonna account is required. Yeah, sure. We connect. You see right now we saw this error. Account is required because there is no account connected. So what if we modify this, because like we don't want to show this error, right, to the user if they have not connected. So one thing that we can do is just to disable the button if they are not connected. So let's do that. Let's go to the button. Let's say I want to disable the button if there is no user address. Okay, now, oh well, yeah, let's disconnect. Let's click, okay, and it's not gonna pass. But you know, the UX is not good because it's still showing like it's enabled. So for that, let's do another ternary and say something like if user address, if there's an user address, then we're gonna put this background. If not, let's use a background. Let's use white. Cool. So right now, you know, it's disabled, but once we connect our account, it's gonna be enabled. Cool. With that, we prevent that behavior that we don't want of having that error. Okay, now let's try that to modify it. Let's click on send, and that will be it. We will be able to sign the transaction that's gonna pass. But then we have an anchor here, right? And right now it's doing nothing, that anchor. So let's do a check transaction on our Explorer. Let's update this. Let's go to the anchor and say, okay, let's replace this with the hash. But you know what? There's also another opportunity here to use another hook. Let's use another hook. So there's a hook called useExplorer. Yeah, useExplorer. Let's look for it. It's somewhere here. Okay, here it is. useExplorer. So with useExplorer, it's a hook where we're gonna send a hash, and that's it. That's gonna create a link to where? To the blockchain explorer. Which one? The one that we defined in our Starknet configuration. Okay, so let's use it. Let's go and import this additional hook, use Explorer, and then we need to define the variable. Let's go to the end step 4 here. Okay, we already have it, and then we are gonna go to the anchor that we have. The anchor is here, and we're gonna update this, and we're gonna say this is expecting explorer dot explorer, and we can inspect a contract or a block or a transaction. in this case, we want to explore a transaction, the transaction that we are just submitting. Right? And what are we going to be sending? We're going to be sending, what is the name of the variable for the transaction that we just submitted? So let's name it write data. And we do this also. Write is pending. We're going to be using write data. So we're going to be passing write data dot transaction hash. That's what's coming here. Okay, now we see that we need to force this, and probably we don't want that. Do we want to show this link every time? Not really, because at this moment that we have not submitted any transaction, this is not going to work. So we want just to render this if there's a transaction. And for that, we're going to be saying, if there is a write data and no, is if there's a write data that has a transaction hash, then I want to show this link. There's no sense for that. Let's put that here. Now it works. Now, right now, there's no link, but once we have a transaction hash, it's going to work. And then what other things we can do with that hook? If we go to here, we can use another one. Let's use now Explorer. Let's use now in the Explorer portion, we can also have the name, for example, on the Explorer. We have explorer.name. So for example, this is more user-friendly. For example, it's like, let the user know, okay, you are gonna check this transaction hash on this Explorer. So let's try that now. Let's see. We're gonna modify by 3, and then we're gonna click send. We're gonna sign, and then there's a link, and that link is gonna redirect to the transaction we just sent. And this is it. That's it. Cool. That will be it. Now, just to the last portion that we're gonna be doing now, the last one is like, what if we want to improve even more your UX? Because right now you're just clicking here, and there is a link. This is good, but what if you want to update your button status, maybe put an animation or something like that to show what is the status of that transaction? Let's do that as an extra last step. So for that, I created one simple animation without the need to import any other library. If you want to go more fancy, you can create your own animation. This is just a simple animation right now where this function is going to put an SVG animation and it's going to get a message. And then what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be copy pasting this because it's long, and let me modify that. No, it's not here. It was here. Okay, waiting confirmation. There are some renaming that I have not done, I guess. Wait, it's loading. Let me see. Yeah. Oh no, you know what? There is another hook that I have not used here. So in order to do that portion that I mentioned, there is another hook called use wait for transaction. So this hook, it's about, okay, we have a transaction hash and we want to know where the status of that transaction, where is that going? So let's use wait for transaction. Let's import that into our last hook we're going to be using today, use wait for transaction. And then how we're going to be using this is with this hook. We don't need a hash because the hash is going to come from write async data. Let's go then. Let's put it here. And then first, let's rename it. This is use wait for transaction, so probably wait is loading, is error, wait is error, and error, it's gonna be wait error, data, it's gonna be wait data. And then we are expecting a transaction. So write data, transaction hash. We are gonna be connecting the two. Now, let me explain you this function. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm modifying the content of that button. This, instead of just send, I'm updating it based on the status of first. If we send a transaction, I'm gonna be saying, if we are gonna send a transaction, we're gonna put the animation and send. This is pretty much when we are waiting for confirmation in our wallet. Then, if the transaction has been sent, but it's still loading, we are gonna be saying waiting for confirmation. Then, if for any reason our transaction was rejected, for example, imagine that in this contract, in fact, in our contract, let me go here. If we try to increase a balance, but there is a zero, there's going to be an error. It's not going to pass, right? So for example, if we try to set 0 here, you're going to have an error. So that error, it's going to trigger this, and you will see a transaction reject. Okay, if it does, if you don't have any error, it will pass, and then we'll say transaction confirmed. And this is a much better approach probably for your UX. Now, the only thing that we need to do is just to replace in the form this send instead of just a text, just to have button content. And that will be it. Let's try it. This will be the last portion. Let's see. Not right now, if we click on send, that's not gonna do nothing. But if we connect, and then let's say we're gonna update by 5, and we click send, check at the button. Right now, it's doing the animation, it's changing the text, and then it's waiting for us to sign the transaction. If we click close here, it's gonna return to send. And of course, we're gonna have an error because there was an error in the execution. But if we do that again, and if we sign the transaction, check at the button. Once it sends, right, it's waiting for confirmation. And then once that is confirmed, you will see transaction confirmed. And then you will be able to click on the link and see, the transaction you just submitted. So yeah, that was the most advanced portion of the workshop. I hope you like it. Please let me know if you want I don't know, additional portion for you to understand about how to transact from the front end with Starknet. But yeah, that was the workshop. Everything is on the repo that I shared before with all the branches, the 4 steps, and that will be it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nestor. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A. If you want to take a look.
How to listen to contract events. So yeah, that's not covered on this one.
You may need to use an indexer in that case.
Yeah, you can use Apibara. Actually, I was thinking about adding that to this workshop, but the portion of adding a web database component, that would be another path. There's a way for you to use Apibara and then set up a database, and then on your front end to read the events for whatever contract you want to read events from, and then you can work with that. But I didn't want to add web 2 portion of it, like databases. How do we connect real-time data REST API to frontend using the smart contract?
Maybe the question is about how to consume real-time data in the smart contract instead of the opposite, because in that case it will be an oracle that you need to use if you want to access information outside of the blockchain. But I don't know if that's the question you have in mind, because otherwise is like chain link functions, as Manas is answering as well. It's not covered here, but there are multiple oracles on a Starknet that you can use to access that information from outside the blockchain.
That would be another workshop. It's like too many things to explain. But yeah, one that I saw here, it's like, okay, Apibara and events with Web2 databases, and then another one about oracles and access to external information. That would be 2 different workshops.
Thank you, Nestor, for the session. It was super informative. I really like it. Marlon also liked it. People saying good things about it. So I know that this recording is going to be very useful in the future as well.
Cool. Thank you so much, folks. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.